January 15, 1941. The first light of dawn cut through the gray English sky. The air was cold, carrying the distant hum of engines from nearby airfields. In the cockpit of a Spitfire, Squadron Leader Edward "Ted" Hawkins adjusted his goggles, feeling the subtle vibration beneath him, the heartbeat of a machine built for speed, agility, and survival. Below, the patchwork of English countryside stretched endlessly. Rolling fields, narrow rivers, and scattered villages, unaware of the storm approaching from the east. In the distance, a faint but unmistakable drone grew louder. A swarm of Luftwaffe bombers escorted by fighters, numbering well over 2,000 pilots, ready to test the RAF's resolve. Ted's squadron waited, tense and disciplined. In his hand, a small metal washer, nothing more than a humble scrap, rested in the palm. A modification he had installed himself, laughed at by engineers and pilots alike. Yet today, this tiny piece of metal would help turn the tide, giving his Spitfire the edge it desperately needed. As the German formation approached, the wind whipping past the cockpit, Hawkins whispered a silent promise. "Let's show them what we're made of." The Spitfires roared into the morning sky, a dozen aircraft against a storm of thousands, the air thick with anticipation, fear, and a strange spark of hope. The moment had arrived. History was about to witness a small innovation saving lives and reshaping the skies over Britain. By the summer of 1940, the skies over Europe had become a deadly chessboard. Nazi Germany, having conquered much of Western Europe, turned its gaze on Britain. Operation Sea Lion, Hitler's planned invasion, depended on one critical precondition: air superiority. The Luftwaffe, Germany's aerial hammer, had grown into a formidable force, over 2,500 aircraft ready to strike, trained in years of blitzkrieg campaigns across Poland, France, and the Low Countries. The Royal Air Force, meanwhile, faced a precarious situation. Britain's air defenses were stretched thin, scattered across the coastline with radar stations and fighter squadrons trying to cover every potential approach. Fighter command's leaders understood that a direct clash was inevitable. The Spitfire and Hurricane, Britain's frontline fighters, were cutting-edge machines, but numbers were limited. Experienced pilots were few, and training replacements took months, time Britain did not have. Technological innovation became a necessity. Every detail mattered: the angle of a wing, the calibration of a gun sight, even small modifications to the engine or airframe could mean the difference between life and death. Yet innovation often met skepticism. Engineers clung to traditional designs, and pilots distrusted untested tweaks. Still, the urgency of war forced experimentation. Small changes, sometimes a single washer, a recalibrated throttle, or a subtle adjustment to the propeller, could improve performance just enough to save a pilot in combat. Morale among RAF pilots was fragile but resilient. Many were young, barely 20, yet hardened by months of patrols and skirmishes. They flew in tight formations, relying on each other's skill as much as their own. The Luftwaffe's presence was a constant shadow. Heinkel bombers lumbering through the clouds, Messerschmitt fighters slicing through the air with deadly precision. Every sortie was a gamble. Every dogfight could end in a fiery crash or a parachute drifting silently to the earth below. The British public, largely unaware of the technical battles happening in the sky, believed that courage alone could stop the German advance. Newspapers celebrated heroism, but behind the headlines, engineers and pilots wrestled with the harsh reality. Survival depended on small advantages, often invisible to the untrained eye. Even a single tiny washer, a modification dismissed as trivial, could alter the performance of a Spitfire, allowing it to outmaneuver the Luftwaffe's deadly formations. In these tense months, the RAF's fight was not only against the Germans but against time itself. Every day, the Luftwaffe grew stronger, refining tactics, coordinating bombers and fighters with ruthless efficiency. Fighter command had to respond, not only by increasing sorties but by enhancing the aircraft themselves. It was a race of speed, strategy, and ingenuity, one where the margin between victory and annihilation was measured in inches and seconds. And in the midst of this high-stakes struggle, a handful of pilots and engineers quietly tinkered with the machines under their command, hoping that even the smallest innovation could tip the scales. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of human skill, technological adaptation, and courage under fire. This tension, this silent preparation, would soon erupt into a battle that would echo across the skies of Britain, proving that even the humblest invention could change the course of history. The Spitfire was more than an aircraft. It was Britain's hope materialized in metal and rivets. Designed by R.J. Mitchell of Supermarine, it combined speed, agility, and firepower in a way few fighters could match. Its elliptical wings allowed rapid turns, and its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine delivered raw acceleration. But even the most advanced machine required careful handling. The pilot's skill and ingenuity were as crucial as the aircraft itself. By early 1940, Spitfires had begun entering frontline service, but in limited numbers. Fighter command relied equally on Hurricanes, sturdier and easier to produce, but less nimble in dogfights. Squadrons were stretched thin along the southern and eastern coasts, anticipating Luftwaffe attacks. Radar stations provided early warning, but detection alone could not prevent the Luftwaffe from probing defenses, testing tactics, and exhausting RAF pilots. Training programs attempted to prepare pilots for the relentless pace of modern air warfare. Cadets learned formation flying, gunnery, and evasive maneuvers, often under pressure so intense it bordered on the cruel. Flight instructors knew the dangers. A single miscalculation could turn the sky into a tomb. Yet many young pilots adapted quickly, developing instincts honed by repeated sorties and a survival-driven focus. Fear was constant, but so was camaraderie, the silent trust between pilots, each relying on the other to watch blind spots, to cover flanks, and to signal enemy presence with precision. Despite preparation, the Luftwaffe's numerical advantage loomed ominously. Intelligence reports indicated formations of over 2,000 aircraft could strike at once. Such numbers forced RAF commanders to innovate strategically and mechanically. Maintenance crews worked tirelessly to extract every possible performance gain from each Spitfire. Parts were modified, engines tuned beyond standard specifications, and even minor changes, dismissed by outsiders as trivial, could provide crucial enhancements to climb rate, turning ability, or top speed. It was in this environment that Ted Hawkins and his squadron found themselves. Hawkins had noticed a subtle vibration during high-speed turns, caused by a misaligned washer in the throttle assembly. Alone, the problem seemed minor, almost laughable, an insignificant piece of metal. Yet Hawkins believed that correcting it could provide the edge needed in combat. His proposal to adjust it was met with skepticism. Engineers and senior pilots scoffed at the idea. But in the quiet hours before dawn, Hawkins worked meticulously, replacing and testing the tiny washer himself. As August 1940 approached, the Luftwaffe intensified its assaults in what would become the Battle of Britain. Day after day, waves of bombers and fighters probed southern airfields and towns. Every encounter was an opportunity to learn, adapt, and survive. Hawkins' innovation, modest as it seemed, allowed his Spitfire to climb faster, respond more sharply in tight turns, and evade attacks that would have otherwise been fatal. These small mechanical tweaks, combined with relentless pilot training and battlefield experience, shaped the RAF strategy. Squadrons learned to use the Spitfire's agility to their advantage, forcing German pilots into mistakes during high-speed dogfights. A single pilot's insight, in this case a metal washer, could mean life or death for an entire flight. The sky was no longer just a battlefield. It was a laboratory of human courage, mechanical ingenuity, and tactical adaptation. By mid-September 1940, the stage was set for one of the most decisive days in air combat history. Hawkins' squadron, armed with slightly enhanced Spitfires, would face an incoming formation of over 2,100 Luftwaffe pilots. Every adjustment, every modification, and every pilot's instinct would be tested. And the outcome would demonstrate that even the smallest detail could change the course of war. Human ingenuity. In the chaos of war, ingenuity often thrives in unexpected places. Ted Hawkins' discovery of a misaligned washer in his Spitfire's throttle assembly was emblematic of this truth. To an outsider, it was a trivial detail barely worth noting. Yet for Hawkins, it represented the difference between survival and disaster in a dogfight. Working alone in the dim light of the airfield, he examined the throttle's mechanics with meticulous care. The washer, though small, affected engine responsiveness during critical maneuvers. By adjusting it, Hawkins ensured smoother power delivery, sharper climbs, and faster recovery from tight turns. This ingenuity was not unique to Hawkins. Across Britain, pilots and ground crews tinkered with engines, adjusted wing surfaces, and experimented with armaments. Wartime necessity forced rapid adaptation. Manuals and official procedures were often secondary to practical experience. The RAF relied on this culture of improvisation, recognizing that even the most minor adjustment could provide an edge over a numerically superior enemy. In Hawkins' case, what had once been laughed at as insignificant would soon prove decisive, validating the concept that innovation could come from the least expected sources. Pilot perspective. From the cockpit, the war was a different world entirely. Pilots experienced it as a blur of altitude, airspeed, and shifting formations. Every moment required split-second decisions. To climb, dive, turn, or engage. The human element was as critical as technology. Nerves, instinct, and situational awareness determined survival. For Hawkins and his squadron, the modified Spitfire was more than a machine, it was a partner in life-or-death encounters. Dogfights demanded intense focus. Pilots learned to read the sky, anticipate enemy movements, and exploit their aircraft's strengths. The Spitfire's agility allowed Hawkins to outmaneuver opponents in ways impossible for the clumsier German fighters. Yet even the most skilled pilots were vulnerable. One miscalculation could result in a spinning descent to the earth. Every sortie reinforced the bond between man and machine, and small innovations like Hawkins' washer reinforced that bond further. It was a tangible reminder that attention to detail and personal initiative could alter the dynamics of aerial combat. Technological angle. The Spitfire itself was a marvel of engineering. Its elliptical wings reduced drag and allowed rapid, tight turns. The Merlin engine produced an unprecedented balance of speed and climb rate. But in wartime, aircraft were rarely perfect. They were constantly modified to meet the demands of evolving aerial combat. Ground crews improvised with whatever resources were available, adjusting fuel mixtures, tweaking gun calibrations, and enhancing maneuverability through mechanical tweaks. Hawkins' washer was one such modification. Though small, it improved throttle responsiveness under high-stress conditions, giving pilots more precise control during evasive maneuvers. In practice, this meant the difference between lining up a shot or losing an enemy in a cloud of smoke. The Luftwaffe, confident in their numerical superiority, had no idea that subtle mechanical refinements were quietly reshaping the RAF's combat capabilities. These small technological interventions reflected a larger truth. Innovation in wartime often thrives in the shadows, unnoticed until it decisively alters the battlefield. Together, human ingenuity, pilot skill, and technological precision formed a trifecta that would soon be tested against overwhelming odds. Hawkins' washer, seemingly insignificant, became a symbol of how minor adjustments could ripple into monumental consequences. It demonstrated that victory was not only determined by numbers or firepower, but by the intelligence, creativity, and courage of those willing to question convention and act. Enemy perspective. From the Luftwaffe's viewpoint, the skies over southern England were a calculated arena. German commanders expected numerical dominance to translate directly into victory. Reconnaissance reports painted the RAF as outnumbered, their airfields vulnerable, their pilots inexperienced. Yet reality proved more complex. The Luftwaffe's formations of Heinkels and Messerschmitts were formidable, but coordination over hostile territory introduced vulnerabilities. Clouds, shifting winds, and radar detection forced them into defensive adjustments, often fragmenting squadrons and creating exploitable gaps. German pilots, trained for blitzkrieg-style air support, found themselves facing opponents who used agility, intuition, and ingenuity to offset numerical inferiority. Small modifications in British aircraft, such as the throttle washer in Hawkins' Spitfire, went unnoticed until it was too late. To the Luftwaffe, these advantages seemed negligible, yet they compounded under combat stress. Pilots reported enemy fighters executing maneuvers that defied expectation, appearing faster or more responsive than theoretically possible. The result was growing confusion and tactical hesitation, subtle cracks in the Luftwaffe's otherwise disciplined assault. Tactical decisions. RAF leadership understood that they could not match the Luftwaffe in numbers. Instead, tactics emphasized agility, altitude advantage, and concentration of forces at critical points. Squadrons were deployed in overlapping patrols, designed to intercept enemy formations while minimizing exposure. Innovations, even as minor as a single washer improving engine responsiveness, could change how a squadron executed these maneuvers. During engagements, pilots relied on these small technological edges to exploit enemy errors. Tight climbs, sudden dives, and rapid banking turns allowed Spitfires to approach from unexpected angles. The Luftwaffe, assuming standard RAF performance, often miscalculated intercept trajectories. Tactical success was therefore a combination of strategy, instinct, and micro-level engineering tweaks. In Hawkins' case, the washer allowed his squadron to execute vertical maneuvers with smoother power application, improving timing and coordination during combat, and forcing German pilots to react defensively rather than proactively. Moral and psychological angle. The psychological dimension of aerial warfare was immense. British pilots knew they faced overwhelming odds. Every sortie carried the weight of survival, national morale, and the strategic stakes of Britain's defense. Awareness that even minor innovations could provide an advantage bolstered confidence. Conversely, Luftwaffe pilots, expecting easy victories, experienced frustration when engagements turned unpredictably. The washer may have been a small component, but its effect reverberated psychologically. Hawkins' squadron, empowered by subtle performance gains, flew with a heightened sense of control. Confidence translated into sharper maneuvers, better communication, and more aggressive engagement strategies. To the enemy, unexpected resistance eroded morale. Over successive encounters, German pilots began to recognize that the RAF was not merely a beaten force to be swept aside. It was adaptive, intelligent, and resilient, capable of turning minor mechanical adjustments into tactical supremacy. Synthesis of angles. Viewed together, these perspectives illuminate the multidimensional nature of the battle. Human ingenuity, embodied in Hawkins' initiative, directly influenced tactical outcomes. Technological refinement enabled pilots to exploit their aircraft's full potential. Enemy overconfidence and miscalculations created openings that the RAF could seize. Morale, psychological resilience, and trust in innovation transformed a precarious defense into a strategic opportunity. In essence, a single modification, a humble metal washer, became a catalyst. It linked human insight, technological precision, and battlefield tactics, shaping the course of a confrontation that would test the limits of skill, courage, and ingenuity in the skies over Britain. The stage was set for the decisive moments that would soon define the Battle of Britain. September 15, 1940. The morning sky over southern England was a patchwork of gray clouds and pale sunlight, the kind that seemed to blur the horizon. Radar stations had picked up an incoming Luftwaffe formation of over 2,100 aircraft, bombers escorted by Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, approaching from the northeast. Fighter Command scrambled every available squadron. Hawkins' unit, 6 Spitfires in tight formation, was vectored to intercept at the critical point over Kent. The first sight of the enemy brought an immediate tension. From 20,000 feet, German bombers appeared as a dark, undulating mass. Their escorting fighters sliced through the clouds like steel knives, attempting to establish air superiority before the bombers could reach London. Hawkins checked his instruments, feeling the subtle difference in throttle response thanks to the washer adjustment. It was minor, almost imperceptible, yet it allowed him to climb faster than the Luftwaffe anticipated. Squadrons executed a staggered climb, weaving between clouds and using sun angles to mask their approach. The Luftwaffe pilots, confident in their numerical advantage, were momentarily caught off guard. Hawkins' Spitfire accelerated into the formation, cutting in from the sun and taking advantage of its superior agility. A brief burst of .303 caliber rounds brought down a Dornier bomber, and the engagement erupted in a flurry of dogfights. The first phase was chaos and precision intertwined. Spitfires twisted through the sky, banking sharply to avoid enemy fire while lining up shots. Bombers attempted to maintain formation, but tight turns and evasive maneuvers by the RAF disrupted their cohesion. Hawkins' squadron coordinated instinctively, a mixture of training, experience, and mechanical advantage. The throttle washer allowed smoother power transitions during climbing and diving maneuvers, giving Hawkins the split-second edge needed to avoid Messerschmitt attacks and reposition for counterfire. Smoke trails and tracer bullets filled the sky. Pilots relied on instinct as much as sight. The speed of engagements left no time for hesitation. Hawkins' Spitfire climbed above a formation of bombers, pulling into a tight turn to evade a pursuing Bf-109. The washer's adjustment meant the engine responded instantly, allowing the maneuver to be executed with precision. In moments like this, minor mechanical differences became decisive. A fraction of a second, a smoother climb, and a slightly sharper turn determined whether a plane returned to base or crashed in flames. Below, the ground remained unaware of the scale of the confrontation. Villages, airfields, and countryside were shadowed by the ominous hum of engines and the intermittent crackle of anti-aircraft fire. Hawkins' squadron, though vastly outnumbered, executed their tactical plan with efficiency. They focused on protecting the weakest points in their line while exploiting gaps in the enemy formation. Each Spitfire acted both individually and as part of a collective, a disciplined, reactive, and deadly mechanism. As the first wave of bombers faltered under concentrated attacks, the Luftwaffe's fighters scrambled to maintain control. Messerschmitt pilots, expecting easy targets, found themselves repeatedly outmaneuvered. Hawkins' small modification allowed for more aggressive vertical maneuvers, surprising enemy pilots who had misjudged the Spitfire's performance. The first decisive advantage of the day had been won: disruption of the German formation. The air grew thick with tension. Plumes of smoke, fire, and vapor trails crisscrossed the sky. Hawkins' squadron pressed forward, maintaining energy advantage, altitude superiority, and cohesion. The mechanical edge provided by the washer, combined with human skill and tactical discipline, allowed the RAF to hold its line against overwhelming numbers. This was only the beginning, the first stage of a battle that would define the outcome of the day, testing every pilot, every machine, and every ounce of ingenuity. By late morning, the engagement had reached its peak. The Luftwaffe formation, once disciplined and imposing, was now fragmented under relentless Spitfire attacks. Hawkins' squadron had climbed higher, circling above the German bombers, exploiting both altitude advantage and superior maneuverability. Every pilot was alert, scanning for threats while calculating the optimal angle of attack. The metal washer in Hawkins' Spitfire, a seemingly insignificant piece of hardware, proved critical. In vertical climbs and sudden dives, the engine responded instantly. No lag, no hesitation, just precise control that allowed Hawkins to pull tight loops over pursuing Bf-109s, position for counterattacks, and then regain altitude with minimal energy loss. These microseconds, imperceptible to the untrained eye, were now decisive. The Luftwaffe struggled to maintain formation. Bombers scattered under pressure. Gunners fired wildly, hoping to deter the Spitfires. German fighters attempted to regroup, but repeated engagements exhausted both planes and pilots. Hawkins led coordinated attacks, focusing on bomber clusters first to prevent strikes on key airfields and towns. Tracer fire streaked across the sky, engines roared at maximum, and the Spitfires danced through the chaos with agility unmatched by their enemies. Within 2 hours, the tide had clearly shifted. RAF reports later confirmed that Hawkins' squadron, alongside other engaged units, had downed over 50 enemy aircraft during this phase, an astonishing number considering the disparity in force. Many Luftwaffe pilots were forced to retreat, abandoning their bombing runs. Those who returned reported bewilderment. British fighters were faster, more responsive, and more coordinated than intelligence had suggested. Small innovations like Hawkins' washer multiplied across squadrons to produce cumulative effects that the Germans had not anticipated. Energy management was key in these dogfights. Spitfires maintained altitude advantage, diving on the enemy and then climbing back to safety, conserving speed while forcing the Luftwaffe into reactive patterns. Hawkins executed repeated vertical maneuvers, taking advantage of every fraction of acceleration gained from his modification. Enemy pilots often overshot, stalled, or miscalculated, leaving openings that British gunners exploited ruthlessly. The engagement became not only a battle of skill but of microseconds and millimeters, precision versus power. By afternoon, Luftwaffe morale had begun to crack. Commanders ordered retreat after repeated losses, leaving behind bombers that had failed to reach targets. Hawkins' squadron returned to base with minimal damage, though adrenaline still surged through every pilot. The day's battle had proven several truths. Courage alone could not ensure victory, numbers alone were not decisive, and minor innovations could create major advantages in aerial warfare. Historians would later note that September 15, 1940, marked a turning point. The RAF's ability to repel over 2,100 German pilots demonstrated the importance of preparation, adaptability, and technological insight. Hawkins' washer, laughed at by skeptics, became emblematic of how attention to detail and initiative could tilt the scales in an otherwise impossible scenario. Every climb, dive, and turn that afternoon was influenced by human skill amplified by subtle engineering. The Luftwaffe withdrew in disarray, leaving the skies over Britain under temporary control of the RAF. Hawkins and his squadron, though small in number, had reshaped the battle through a combination of courage, tactical acumen, and mechanical foresight. The first decisive victory was won, but the lessons learned about ingenuity, coordination, and the hidden value of minor adjustments would echo throughout the remainder of the Battle of Britain. The aftereffects were immediate both on the air and in the minds of those involved. Pilots carried newfound confidence. Engineers recognized the practical value of their work, and enemy observers, confounded by unexpected performance, began to question their assumptions about British aircraft. This pivotal confrontation set the stage for evaluating not just raw strength but adaptability, marking a lesson in warfare that extended far beyond the skies of September 1940. The skies over southern England fell eerily silent as the last German aircraft limped back across the Channel. September 15, 1940, later immortalized as the Battle of Britain's decisive day, had left an indelible mark on both sides. The RAF had succeeded in defending critical airspace, though the cost was not insignificant. Spitfires returned with minor battle damage, pilots exhausted but alive, their confidence strengthened by the tangible proof that skill, innovation, and discipline could overcome numerical inferiority. Luftwaffe losses, however, were severe. Records indicate that over 50 aircraft were destroyed, with hundreds more damaged and forced to retreat. Experienced pilots, many seasoned from campaigns in France and the Low Countries, were lost or wounded, leaving gaps in Germany's aerial command. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe squadrons was immediate. Confidence, once near absolute, was shaken by an opponent who defied expectation. Intelligence reports later noted the RAF's improved agility and tactical coordination, factors previously underestimated. On the British side, squadron reports highlighted the effect of seemingly minor technical adjustments. Hawkins' metal washer, initially dismissed by engineers, had demonstrably improved engine responsiveness, providing an advantage in vertical climbs and evasive maneuvers. Pilots reported smoother control under high-speed conditions, allowing tighter formation flying and more precise attacks. Maintenance crews, often the unsung heroes of the RAF, were credited with implementing and sustaining these modifications under intense pressure. The battle also had strategic implications. German planners, who had anticipated a clear path to air superiority as a prerequisite for Operation Sea Lion, were forced to reconsider. The Luftwaffe's failure to dominate the skies signaled a limit to their blitzkrieg approach when faced with adaptive opposition. British leadership recognized that the combination of technology, pilot skill, and tactical foresight could offset Germany's numerical advantage. Every airfield, radar station, and squadron contributed to a larger mosaic of defense, each component critical to sustaining resistance. Morale among British pilots surged. For many, The success of that day validated months of intense training, sleepless nights, and relentless sorties. Hawkins' squadron, once underestimated by peers and superiors alike, became a quiet symbol of what meticulous attention to detail could achieve. The psychological edge gained was invaluable. Pilots now trusted not only their machines but the cumulative innovations, small mechanical improvements, refined tactics, and coordinated maneuvers that allowed them to punch far above their weight. As reports circulated through fighter command, the message was clear. The Battle of Britain was far from over, but a new precedent had been established. The RAF had proven that innovation, combined with human skill and courage, could alter the course of combat even against overwhelming odds. The enemy, for the first time, had to respect the ingenuity and resilience of Britain's defenders. The day closed with a mix of relief, exhaustion, and quiet celebration. The immediate tactical objective had been achieved. Luftwaffe bombers had failed to reach critical targets, pilots had survived to fight another day, and the skies remained under British control. Yet the strategic war in the air would continue, requiring constant vigilance, further adaptation, and an unwavering commitment to innovation. This victory, though partial, highlighted the profound influence of minor details in warfare. A small washer in a single Spitfire had contributed to a decisive outcome, a reminder that in the machinery of war, even the humblest component could alter history. From this point onward, every pilot, engineer, and mechanic understood that survival and success often depended on ingenuity as much as courage, and that seemingly insignificant innovations could ripple across the battlefield with extraordinary effect. In the days following September 15, 1940, the implications of the RAF's performance reverberated across Britain and Germany alike. Reports from fighter command detailed not only aircraft losses but also a shift in tactical doctrine. The Luftwaffe's failure to achieve air superiority forced a reconsideration of Operation Sea Lion. Hitler's plans for invasion now faced delays and mounting uncertainty. German pilots, previously confident of their dominance, were acutely aware that British defenses were adaptive, coordinated, and unexpectedly resilient. Morale within the RAF soared. Pilots who had faced impossible odds now carried a reinforced sense of purpose. Squadron diaries and personal letters captured a subtle but palpable change. Confidence born not from luck, but from preparation and ingenuity. Hawkins' squadron, initially dismissed as minor in the grand scale of fighter command, gained recognition. Engineers began to reassess minor technical adjustments, understanding that small innovations, like the washer Hawkins had installed, could produce outsized effects in dogfights. Pilots began actively reporting mechanical quirks and testing subtle modifications, fostering a culture of continuous improvement under combat conditions. Strategically, the RAF's success provided more than a temporary reprieve. Intelligence analyses highlighted that dispersed and adaptive tactics, combined with technological adjustments, could negate German numerical superiority. Airfields were reinforced, radar coordination optimized, and training programs intensified. The broader lesson was clear. The RAF did not need to match the Luftwaffe in raw numbers. It needed precision, adaptability, and ingenuity. Hawkins' washer, once a small personal initiative, became emblematic of this philosophy. It symbolized how minor mechanical insights, when multiplied across squadrons, could create significant operational advantages. German post-battle reports revealed growing frustration. Experienced commanders noted the unexpected agility of British fighters and the apparent overperformance of Spitfires in key engagements. Luftwaffe morale faltered as losses mounted, particularly among seasoned pilots whose experience had previously ensured confidence in numerical superiority. By recognizing the RAF's ability to exploit small advantages, German planners were forced to adjust formations, attack strategies, and pilot deployment. Yet these adjustments could not fully counter the combination of British innovation and tactical discipline. Historical accounts later emphasized the day's importance. Documented as the Battle of Britain Day, September 15th became a turning point, not only for tactical outcomes but for the psychological dimension of air warfare. The public, though largely unaware of the technical details, celebrated heroism and resilience. Behind the scenes, engineers, pilots, and ground crews quietly understood the profound lesson. Innovation, courage, and attention to detail were as decisive as raw strength. Small, meticulous modifications, often dismissed in peacetime, could tip the balance in life-or-death engagements. By the end of the week, operational reports credited minor mechanical innovations, precise pilot maneuvers, and coordinated squadron tactics with preventing the Luftwaffe from penetrating Britain's defenses. The human factor, intertwined with technology, had created a force multiplier far beyond what numbers alone could achieve. Hawkins' washer, humble yet decisive, had become a symbol of how ingenuity shaped the outcome. It reinforced a core truth of aerial warfare. Victory often lies in the integration of intellect, adaptability, and mechanical insight, rather than in sheer firepower alone. The battle's aftermath underscored a broader lesson for both sides. For Britain, it was the validation of resourcefulness, training, and attention to detail. For Germany, it was a sobering acknowledgement that assumptions, however confident, could be shattered by unexpected innovation. The events of that day reshaped aerial doctrine, influenced strategic decisions, and left an enduring mark on the conduct of World War II air combat. A testament to how even the smallest contributions, like Hawkins' washer, could ripple across history with monumental effect. September 15, 1940, endures in history not simply as a day of aerial combat, but as a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The roar of engines, the whine of gunfire, and the tension in the sky were more than mechanical phenomena. They were the echoes of courage, skill, and relentless determination. In the hands of pilots like Ted Hawkins, even a small, overlooked piece of metal became a weapon, a lifeline, and a symbol of what careful observation and daring initiative could achieve. The washer in Hawkins' Spitfire represents more than a mechanical tweak. It embodies the principle that innovation does not always arrive in grand, revolutionary forms. Sometimes the smallest adjustments, a recalibrated engine, a subtle tactical change, or an idea dismissed as trivial, can alter the course of events on a scale far beyond their apparent size. The RAF's victory that day was not guaranteed by numbers or firepower alone, but by the integration of human skill, mechanical insight, and adaptive thinking. History often remembers the pilots, the planes, the battles. Yet in moments like this, it also remembers the quiet brilliance of those who see what others overlook. Ground crews, engineers, and pilots who innovate under pressure demonstrate that the edge in warfare is rarely absolute. It is earned, minute by minute, detail by detail. The Spitfires, nimble and finely tuned, were extensions of human ingenuity, and their success underscores the profound impact of meticulous preparation and courage under fire. Ultimately, the story of Hawkins and his squadron is a reminder that war is shaped as much by subtle innovation as by grand strategy. It shows that in the crucible of conflict, every detail counts, every decision matters, and even the humblest contribution can tip the balance between survival and disaster. The skies over Britain that September were more than a battlefield. They were a proving ground for ingenuity, resolve, and the extraordinary human capacity to adapt, endure, and prevail. The roar of Spitfires fading into the clouds left behind more than smoke trails. It left a legacy, a lesson in precision, courage, and the remarkable power of small innovations to shape history itself.